Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chavches, Daf Koyach, Masechta Yoma. The Daf begins kind of with the conclusion of the statement of our discussion of, a conclusion of our discussion of the statement of Rabbi Yochanan from yesterday, who had said that a Zar, a non-Kohen, who organizes the wood on the Mizbeach is Chayav Misa. We had a question which led into a discussion about that yesterday, a slightly different discussion about it today. We start the next parak, the third parak of Amar Loim Amemune, and we get into some interesting agadatas on Chav Ches Amud Beis. So let us begin. We're on Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. 2 lines from the bottom. Vikada Amr, to those who say Maske Flor Bzer Asakash V'chesh Chavoda Sheish Achrei Avoda Ufsula B'zar. Do we have an example, a precedent for an avoda that has after it other avoda and yet it's Psula B'zar? What does this mean? So, if we remember, yesterday we had a statement of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says that a Zar, a non-Kohen, who organizes the wood on top of the Mizbeach, on the pyre of the Mizbeach, is Chayav Misa B'dei Shamayim. Now, the question was, Reb Zera asked the kasha yesterday, and he said, wait, where do we have a precedent for something that an avoda that's allowed to be done at night, that a Zar would be Chayav Misa for? To which we then, Rabbi Yochanan had to amended Rabbi Yochanan's statement to say, not that a Zar who organizes the wood on the Mizbeach is Chayav Misa, but rather a Zar who does the Shnei Gzirei Eitzim, who puts the 2 strips of wood on top of the pyre of the Mizbeach, he is going to be Chayav Misa. The Gemara now offers an alternative version of Reb Zera's kasha, so that instead of Reb Zera saying, hey, do we ever have a precedent for an avoda that can be done at night that a Zar would be Chayav Misa for, he asks differently, which is, do we have a precedent for an avoda that has after it other avodas, right? When you organize the wood on top of the Mizbeach, well, afterwards you're going to be putting the Shnei Gzirei Eitzim on top of it. So therefore it's an avoda that has other avodas that still have to come after it. Do we have a precedent where such a case, an avoda sheish achrei avoda, a Zar would be Chayav Misa for? So, interestingly, so the Gra and Rashi take out the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines until halfway through the 5th line of Chav Ches, and we're going to see that we can cut out a whole bunch of stuff in a few minutes as well. So Ele Yitmar Hachi Yitmar. So rather, if it's going to be stated, state Rabbi Yochanan's statement the following way: Amar Reb Asim Rabbi Yochanan Zar Shesider Shnei Gzirei Eitzim Chayav. That rather, like we said yesterday, what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is that a Zar who organizes the Shnei Gzirei Eitzim, the 2 strips of wood that you put on top of the pyre of the Mizbeach, so then you are Chayav, the Zar is Chayav Hol Avoda Tamahi, since it is a complete avoda. It's a completion of avoda. There's nothing that comes after that. Maskefla Rava. Rava asks the kasha, Helmiatu Tibai Pious. But if putting the Shnei Gzirei Eitzim is an avoda tama, it's a complete avoda, so then shouldn't it require a lottery? V'lo ba'ya pais, to which the Gemara says, what do you mean? Of course we have a lottery for the Shnei Gzirei Eitzim. V'atanya, we're learning a brayso, mishazacha b'tshuma sadesh, and he's going to see the Shnei Gzirei Eitzim, that a fellow, right, whoever wins the lottery to be able to do the Truma Sadeshan, well, he also does the Shnei Gzirei Eitzim, so we do see that the Shnei Gzirei Eitzim was chosen in the context of a lottery. This is what Rav is saying. If it's an avoda tam, if it's a completion of avoda, it should warrant its own lottery. Why does it get shtupped in with Truma Sadeshan? The Gemara answers Kedam Rinun. The Gemara says, well, we had a reason for it. That initially the Truma Sadeshan, they would race to the top of the Mizbeach. That got too dangerous, so then they made a lottery for it. Then people weren't showing up, so they threw in also the Sidor Marach and the Shnei Gzirei Eitzim. So there was other cheshbonis dartin. However, we are going to stick with the Shnei Gzirei Eitzim being an avoda tama, a completion of an avoda, and therefore a zar, a non-Kohen who does that avoda will be chayiv misa. The name of the avoda tama v'zar chayiv oleh misa ba'yapayis. Is that to say that where do you require a lottery? Only for things that are a completion of avoda and that a zar, a non-Kohen, would be chayiv misa for? Ein zar chayiv oleh misa lo ba'yapayis. But if a non-Kohen would not be chayiv misa, I don't know how to say that without double negatives. If a zar, whatever, if a zar would not be chayiv misa, well then we wouldn't do a pious. Wow, triple negative? I don't know. Is there a way that I could say that without all the negatives? I don't know. But basically, are we saying that the criteria to warrant a pious, to warrant a lottery, is that it has to be something that is a complete avoda, and that if a zar does it, he'd be chayiv misa. Anything short of that, so then there would be no lottery. But what about slaughtering the korban tamid? Slaughtering the korban tamid was part of a lottery, right? Mishochit, mizorek. So, but that's something that a non-Kohen is allowed to do. He's certainly not chayiv misa for slaughtering the korban tamid. So shiny shchita. Shchita is an exception. The tchilas avodah d'yomah, the reason why slaughtering the korban tamid gets its own lottery is because it's mamish the first avodah of the entire day. That's why it gets its own lottery. But I guess as a rule, to warrant a lottery would have to be something that's a completion of avodah and that a zar is chayiv misa for. Okay, skip the next few lines until Amar Mar Zutra. It's like another 5 lines or something, around 5 lines before the end of the parak. Amar Mar Zutra, V'teim Rav Ashi, Afananami Tanina. We taka also learn in a Mishnah that the Shnei Gezir Eitzim would be considered a completion of an avoda. Omar Loema Memune, that as we're about to learn at the very beginning of the next parak, that the Sgan HaKohanim said to the Kohanim, to Ru'u Migiyazman Hashchita, go and see if it is yet time to slaughter the korban Tamid Shel Shachar. V'iluzman Sidur Shnei Gezir Eitzim Lo Katani, but it doesn't say anything about go see if it's time yet, meaning go see if it's light out, which would mean that it's time to put the Shnei Gezir Eitzim on the Mizbeach. It doesn't say that. So we want to argue, Mar Zutra wants to argue, how come it doesn't mention the Shnei Gezir Eitzim? It must be because the Shnei Gezir Eitzim aren't actually something that you have to davka do in the morning, but rather it's the completion of the ordering the wood on the Mizbeach, which is something that could already be done at night. So we see that the Shnei Gezir Eitzim is a completion of an avoda, the completion of the avoda of organizing the wood on the Mizbeach. So Gemara says that's not necessarily a proof, because you could theoretically argue that the Shnei Gezir Eitzim is not necessarily just a completion of the Sidur HaMa'aracha, which can be done at night. But if that's the case, then how come it wasn't listed with, why don't you go see if it's light enough so that we could do the Shnei Gezir Eitzim during the day? That's because the Mishnah was only listing things that if you mess them up, you can't fix them. Like the Tamid Shel Shachar, as we're going to see in a second in the new Mishnah, that if you end up slaughtering it at night because you make a mistake, you have to throw it in the garbage. And therefore, the Memune, the Skana Kohanim, the assistant to the Kohen Gadol, would say, hey, make sure that it's light outside so that we can shech the korban tamid, because if it's not light outside, we're going to have to throw it in the garbage, and we certainly don't want to do that. Whereas the Shnei Gezir Eitzim, it's not the end of the world if you do it at the night, because you can always just fix it, just put them back on. Alright? Well, Hajan Olach Barishona, we just finished the second parak of Masechta Yoma, which is called at the beginning. Third parak of Masechta Yoma. Amaloi Mamemune, that the Sgan Kohen Gadol, the assistant, the deputy to the Kohen Gadol, said to them, to Ru'u Migia Zman Hashchita, go and see if it is light enough yet, if it is yet the time for us to slaughter the korban Tamid Shel Shachar. Migia, if it is already time, Haroa Omer Bar Koi. So the person who sees that it's light outside, he says Bar Koi, which means like the sun is starting to shine. Masa ben Shmuel Omer, Heir Pnei Kol HaMizrach. Maseh ben Shmuel says that the entire eastern skyline is light. Ad Shebechevin, we're going to see a discussion in the Gemara exactly who's taught, what the dialogue is here. But somebody's saying until Chevron, v'omer hein, and he says yes. V'lo mahutzuchu l'chach. And how come we need these lookouts? How come we specifically need to go to the top of right? It says Rashi, in the second Rashi in the Perek, Tzuru ala choma o ala gag. Right? Go climb up to the top of the wall, the top of the roof, go somewhere high, and make sure that it's light outside. How come we have to, have this specific system where we go and we look out, we go to a high place? Shapam achas ala mar alavana. Well, because one time there was light coming from the moon, v'dimu sheher mizrach. And on this one occasion, the light coming from the moon was emanating in such a way that they were mamish able to be mistaken and fooled into thinking that it was actually light outside, that the day began. V'shachtu es hatamid, and therefore they slaughtered the korban tamid. They were getting started in the Beis HaMikdash, starting with the daytime avodas. V'otziu lebeis hasreifa, and in the end they had to throw it in the garbage because it was slaughtered at night, and the korban tamid shel shachar cannot be slaughtered at night; it has to be slaughtered during the day. So therefore, to prevent a repeat, they would specifically go up to the top of the wall and look out and be sure that the sun has risen. The Gemara is going to explain exactly at what point they would take the Kohen Gadol to the base. Atvila, Ze'aklal, this is the rule called Ze'aklal hoye b'mikdash. This was the rule in the Beis HaMikdash called Amesach es raglav. Somebody who defecates, Ton Tvila, he's got to go to the mikveh afterwards in the Beis HaMikdash. Chamato mayim, somebody who urinates, Ton Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, has to do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim from the Kiyur. Okay, sounds good to me. Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim is basically washing your hands and your feet. I think they would all do it. They would just basically do it in one motion. They would kind of put their hands by their feet and do it all together, I believe. Says the Gemara, top of Chav Ches Amud Beis. Tani Rabbi Shmuel Omer Bar Koi, Barak Bar Koi. So we learn in a Brisa that according to Rabbi Shmuel, what they would say when they would see the light in the morning, they would say Barak Bar Koi. Alright? Some kind of lashon of like light coming out. Rabbi Kiva Omer Olo Bar Koi. Rabbi Kiva says that they would say Olo Bar Koi, which is a little bit lighter than Barak Bar Koi. Nechuma ben Afkashon, you know who that is? Neither do I. Omer Af Bar Koi bechevron. So he says, is it even Bar Koi in Chevron? Alright? Maseh ben Shmuel, Hamamuna ala Payosus Omer, says Maseh ben Shmuel, who is in charge of the lotteries. Very interesting. I think I had said the other day, like, who is this Memuna that does the lotteries? Is it the Skan? Is it some other person just kind of running the show? So apparently there was this Maseh ben Shmuel, whose role it was to orchestrate the lotteries. Interesting. So has the entire eastern skylight, eastern side of the world become light all the way till Chevron. Chevron is in the south, so I guess it's saying, Kilu, has the sun risen enough that its light is reaching southwards towards Chevron. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, says Yehuda ben Beseira, Heir kol pnei hamizrach ad bechevron, has the entire eastern sky become light until Chevron, v'yatzu kol ha'am ish limlachto, and everybody's already going out to their work. Yachi naga letuva. To which the Gemara says, 1 second, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, if they're waiting till the point where it's light enough and everybody's now going to work, 9 a.m., that's very, very late. So the Gemara answers, Liskar Pa'alim Ka'aminu. Says Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, no, I'm not referring to the workers who are going to work at 9 a.m. or maybe a little bit earlier to get there by 9 a.m. But I'm referring to the employers who need to find people to do the work. So they have to go out earlier so that they can find people. So it's a little bit earlier than that, although Mistame could be Taka, the latest time offered out of all these options, but it wasn't quite 9 a.m. Amr of Safra, Tzlosa da Avra, Mishachri Kosle, says of Safra that the prayer of Avram was from once the walls become black. Now, obviously, we all learned Holy cannoli. What daf was it in Masechta Brachos where we learned about the prayers? Was that daf chav ches or daf chav tes? Some was daf chav tes. I have to take a look, but now we're on daf chav ches of Yoma. Did we quote it anywhere over here? I don't know. I'll go upon him. So where are we? So everybody's thinking that what's the prayer of Avraham Avinu Shachris? This is not referring to Mincha. So it's an interesting shaila. Why are we referring to Mincha as the prayer of Avraham Avinu? I don't think that there's really an amazing answer. I think I saw somewhere Avraham Avinu also davened Mincha, but whatever it is. So Rav Safra says of Safra Tzlois to Avram, the prayer of Avram, the afternoon prayer, or that he would pray in the afternoon. Okay. Oh, what's this? Perish tefillas ha'avos kulam v'lo hizkar Avram elam p'neshu ikar, that he's the main one. Okay, whatever it is. Let's go weiter. So at what point can you start davening mincha? From the time that the walls become black, and we've seen this lashon before. Maybe Takim Masechta Pesachim by the Talmud Shel Ben Arbaim, that once the walls become dark, and what we want to say over here is that what that means is that at mamish at noon, that once the sun is directly above, right? That up until noon, so the sun is in the east and it's shining. And if you have a wall that's completely vertical, so the sun is going to be shining on the eastern side of the wall. But once it hits exactly noon, so then the sun is directly above the wall, which means that the eastern side of the wall is no longer bright from the sun. So at that point, you can already start praying mincha. Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef says an interesting statement, which is what we're going to learn from the way that Avraham Avinu did things. I guess the implication being, Avraham Avinu was obviously amazing, but he was pre-Matan Torah. So how are we going to learn things from Avraham Avinu? Amar Rava, says Rava, Tanagam me Avraham, v'anan lo gaminan mineh. Says Rava, Avraham was good enough for the Brisa to learn out from. Why can't we learn out anything from Avraham? The Tanya is winning the Brisa, v'yomashmini yimo b'sar alaso, that on the 8th day, you do bris milah for a baby boy. Teaches that, right, uvayom hashmini, the 8th day, technically any time on the 8th day, the entire day, is kosher for bris milah. Elishaz reason, makdim in the mitzvahs. But the people who are meticulous about mitzvahs, so they do it earlier. Or those who are motivated, inspired by mitzvahs, do it earlier. Shneimar, as the Apostle says, Vayashkim Avram baboko vayachvosh es chamor v'gomer, that Avram Avinu got up early in the morning and he saddled his donkey to do Akedas Yitzchak. So we see that we do learn out things. We have a halacha that's reason makdim the mitzvahs by bris milah, from the fact that Avram Avinu Vayashkim Avram baboko, that he woke up early in the morning. Se'ela amar Rava Rav Yitzchak haka kashele. So rather says Rava, I don't know if I said Rav Yitzchak, but Rav Yosef had the following question. This is what he meant when he's saying, how can we learn that from Avraham Avinu? From the fact that he davened mincha at noon. Ditnan, because after all, we have a Mishnah in Pesachim, in Perek Tov Nishchat, Ditnan, that we learn in the Mishnah, Chol Arbe Pesachim Lios Be'erev Shabbos. Of course, we know, as if it was yesterday, that if Erev Pesach falls out on Friday, and we have to slaughter the Korban Pesach, Nishchat b'sheish v'mechza, so we slaughter the Korban Tamid shel ben Arbaim at 6.5 hours into the day, v'karev b'sheva v'mechza, and it's offered at 7.5 hours into the day, v'nishchatim b'chim shachri kosle. Now if what Rav Safra is saying is correct, that Avraham Avinu already prays mincha at noon, so why don't we do the same thing? Why don't we say at the earliest time that you could slaughter the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim is noon, not a half an hour after that. To which the Gemara gives a few answers. My kusha. What's the question? V'duma kosle the Beis Hamikdash b'sheish v'mechza meshachrei mishum d'lo mechavnei tuva. You can answer that me'ikar adin, yeah, you can pray mincha already from noon. However, the walls in the Beis Hamikdash, which they were going based on for slaughtering the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim, the walls of the Beis Hamikdash were very tall. And therefore they were wider at the bottom and they would get thinner as they went up. And therefore that would have nafkaminas in terms of at what point the eastern wall actually becomes dark. And for that, it takes an extra half an hour. Okay? Inami, or else, Shiny Avram, maybe Avram Avinu was an exception to the rule that Stagninus Gedola Haisa Belibo, that he was mamish an expert astrologer, as Rashi points out from Gemara in Baba Basra, about 6 lines from the bottom of the right column of Rashi. It's Stagninus Gedola Haisa Belibo v'chol malchei mizrach u'mayrav mashkim lefischol lishol b'mazalos, that all of the kings of west and of east and west would come to ask kashis from Avram Avinu about different constellations. So Avram Avinu really understood astrology very well, and therefore he knew exactly when noon was, and he could pray at noon exactly, but we wait until a half an hour later. Inami, mishum dezakin v'yoshev b'yeshiva hava. You hear that? Alternatively, Avram Avinu was a zakin, an elder, and he was sitting in yeshiva. And I was learning with my friend Josh Weinberg on Shabbos, and some of us, some people at Babylon Talmud met Josh Weinberg at a recent siyum, and so he had a pshat over here that from the Gemara in Kiddushin that zaken is an acronym for Zekana Chachma. This is a person who has acquired wisdom. Anyway, so it says that Mishum Zaken v'yoshev b'yeshiva ava, that Avram Avinu was an elder and he was sitting in yeshiva. And because he was sitting in yeshiva, I guess that's how he knew exactly when to daven mincha. That from the days of our fathers, the Yidden were always learning in yeshiva. When the Yidden, even pre-Matan Torah, we were in Mitzrayim, there was yeshiva over there. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Lech v'asafta ziknei Yisrael, go and gather the elders of Israel. And if we go based on Josh Weinberg's pshat, that ziknei means zekana chachma, kilu tamidei chachamim, so already in Mitzrayim, there were tamidei chachamim. Hayu b'midbar yeshiva imoim. In the desert there was yeshivas. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, esveli shivim ish miziknei Yisrael. Go and gather for me 70 people from the elders of Israel, from the Talmidei Chachamim. Avram Avinu zaken v'yoshev b'yeshiva haya. Avram Avinu was a yeshiva student. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, v'Avram zaken b'bayomim, that Avram was a zaken. Yitzchak Avinu zaken v'yoshev b'yeshiva haya, that Yitzchak Avinu learned in yeshiva. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, v'ayi ki zaken Yitzchak, it was when Yitzchak was a zaken. Yaakov Avinu zaken v'yoshev b'yeshiva haya. Shenemar ve'enei Yisrael kavdu mizoken, that the eyes of Israel, of Yaakov Avinu, were heavy from zoken. Eliezer Eved Avram zaken v'yoshev b'yeshiva haya. Avram Avinu's servant Eliezer learned in yeshiva. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Vayom Avram el Abdo Zkan Beso Moshe b'chol asher lo, that Avram Avinu said to his slave, the Zakan Beso, to the Zakin, the elder, the Talmud Chacham in his house, HaMoshe b'chol asher lo, who rules over everything that he has, Amar Eliezer, Shem Moshe b'Toras Rabo, that he rules over the Torah of his master, that Avram Avinu was learning Torah, and Eliezer, the slave, was a big Talmud Chacham. He mamish was very knowledgeable in all of the Torah of his master, Avram Avinu. Hu damesek Eliezer, when the pasuk says that describes Eliezer as the damesek from Damascus, the domestic Eliezer Amar Belazar Shedola Umashko Mitoraso Sharabul Acher, that he draws and gives to drink from the Torah of his master to others. Amar Rav Kim Avram Avinu Kol HaTorah Kula, says Rav that Avram Avinu was Mekayim, I guess he fulfilled all of the Torah. Shnemar, as the pasuk says, Eikav Sheshama Avram B'Koli V'Gomer, that because Avram listened to my voice, and the pasuk that says Vayishmor Mishmarti Torah, what was it? Vayishmor Mishmarti Mitzvosai Chukosai V'Torosai. That Avram Avinu guarded all of my guardings, my mitzvahs, my statutes, my Torahs. He did everything. Maybe what it means is that Avram Avinu was Mekayim all the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. But what about Bris Milah? He did Bris Milah. So maybe Avram Avinu did the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach and Bris Milah, but not necessarily all 613 mitzvahs. To which Rav responds, Im ke mitzvosai v'sorosai l'amali. Then what's my mitzvahs and my Torahs? Amar Rava v'temer of Ashi came Avram Avinu afilu eruv tavshilin. Avram Avinu even did eruv tavshilin, which is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Torosai. My Torah is plural. Achas Torah sheb'chsav, achas Torah sheb'al peh. The written Torah and the oral Torah. So says Rav that Avram Avinu Mamish was Mekayim the entire Torah, even pre-Matan Torah. Wow. Amazing. Masi ben Shmuel Omer Chulei Vu Omer Hein. So the Gemara moves on to the next, piece of the Mishnah, where Masi ben Shmuel says that there would be this dialogue, and the Gemara is now going to go into the dialogue between who. But there was this dialogue about somebody would go up to the roof to see if it's light outside. There would be okay, is it light until Chevron? Yes. What's going on over here? Man Omar Hein. Who's the one saying yes? If it's the fellow on the roof, who cholim vu mavsher, what he's the one dreaming and also interpreting the dream. Ella hachdekoya ara minayada. But if it's the fellow on the ground, how is he the one who can know if it's light out or not? You can explain it either way. So if you want to say that the person saying yes is the person on the roof, so here's the dialogue. So the person on the roof goes up to the roof and he takes a look out and he sees that it's light out in the east. And then the fellow standing on the ground shouts up to the person on the roof, how light is it? Is it so light that even the light is reaching Chevron? To which the fellow on the roof says, yes, it's light enough that even the light has reached Chevron. Or you could say that it's the person on the ground saying yes. That the fellow on the ground says, has it reached light all the way? Is it light in the east? To which the fellow on the roof says, yes, it's light enough even until Chevron. To which the so the person on the roof says that it's light out. Meaning the fellow on the ground says to the person on the roof, he says, hey, is it light out? And then the fellow on the roof says, you want to know if it's light out until Chevron? And the fellow on the ground says, yes. Alright. Very nice. Yeah, Rashi points out that maybe that the Rishomi says, the only reason why there's this Chevron playing a role over here is because we want to mention the merit of the fathers in this whole organizing of the Korban Tamid and making sure it's light out. Alright, well, Chevron, that was Daf Chof Ches of Masechta Yoma. The daf began with sort of another different shot in the discussion at the end of yesterday, where Rabbi Yochanan had initially said that a zar who organizes the wood on the mizbeach is chayiv misa. The alternative approach says, hey, but how could it be that there's an avoda, that organizing the wood on the mizbeach is something that has afterwards more avoda, and yet we don't have a precedent for a zar being chayiv misa for that. So in the end, we say, like we said yesterday, that if a zar organizes the shnei gezirei eitzim, so it'll be chayiv misa. We then concluded the second parak and began the third parak, which discusses that when they would check to see how light it was, to see if they could already slaughter the korban tamid shel shachar, because if it is not yet light, they're going to have to throw it in the garbage, as the Mishnah points out once happened. And then we got into some very interesting gemaras and agadatas about Avraham Avinu, how the Yidden always had yeshivas. The Yidden were always learning. As we're doing till this day, we're still learning. The Yidden were always learning, even in Mitzrayim. They had yeshivas and they had Talmidei Chachamim. And says Rav that Avraham Avinu was Mekayim the entire Kol Torah Kula. He even made Eruvei Tavshilin when you had Shabbos after Yontif. Said he can cook on Yontif for Shabbos. So anyways, that was Daf Chav Ches of Masechta Yoma. Very, very interesting daf. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Cheers.